Um, so hi, my name is Thomas, and I'm from Thomas Jurgen. Jurgen is sitting over here, so he's the lucky one this time. Um, so we like to call ourselves an experimental graphic design studio. We're here in Rotterdam, and we were asked to give a presentation about this month's theme, depth. Did anybody see the introduction I made about this theme? I thought it would be funny to pronounce the word in a wrong way, and now I ruined it for myself completely. And it's really hard to pronounce it, so depth. We thought it was a bit of an abstract theme, so it took a while to find what we could do with it. And I was planned to say that we mainly make 2D work, but Iskander spoiled this because he said we made some spatial work as well. But the presentation is not going to be about spatial work. And sometimes we apply a drop shadow to add some depth, but a presentation about a drop shadow of 20 minutes didn't seem fun to us as well. Although maybe it could, but not this time. And in the end, we saw a link with a creative method that we use and plays an important role in our practice. It changed a lot during the last few years, and we thought it would be nice to take you into the depth of this method and show you this. So that's the link with this team. We consider ourselves as real makers. Our design process only starts as soon as we start working visually. Thinking about making without actually making never leads us to any progress. And sometimes we also like to say that we think by making and not the other way around. So super short introduction about how we see ourselves as designers. Next to that, we're also big music lovers, and especially jazz and improvisation can fascinate us enormously. And we think it's intriguing to hear and see how a group of musicians can create together in freedom on a stage. And we also like this quote from Miles Davis about improvisation. I'll play it first and tell you what it is later. It also suits with our motto of thinking by making. And because this quote is also a bit at odds with how people normally think about design, it also appealed to us. About improvisation, we also wanted to learn to play in such a way, but we're not musicians. Jurgen plays trumpet in a carnival band, and I played the drums 15 years ago, so with those skills we were not going to make it. So we wanted to do this in a more visual way. So after some further research on improvisation, we started with making because that suits us best. And we went to a hutje op de heide. I don't know if you know that term, but we started our first visual jam sessions, which you can see here. And improvisation is not just about doing something out of thin air. There's always a framework or some rules in which the improvisation takes place. And in music, for example, this can be a chord progression. And in our sessions, you can clearly see rules about material use or direction, duration of time, and also different roles that we assign to each other. We used spray paint, markers, crayons, but also colored paper, colored tape. Some sessions lasted for 5 minutes, some for 30 seconds. So we were experimenting in the broadest form to get a grip on what this method could be. These sessions in combination with the research we had already done gave us a better picture of what improvisation means and what it could do for us and how we could apply it. And for example, technical skills doesn't really matter. It's more about the mindset that's important. And to better understand this, we made these guiding principles. So making the moment is about not knowing what's coming or what others are going to do. And you can only react at what's happening in the moment. Finding freedom and restriction is about the framework that has been made before and for looking what is possible within this. Embracing the unexpected has to do with working together with others of whom you do not know exactly what they are going to do. And you must be open to respond to this. And dare to fail is important because mistakes happen unexpectedly and they can't be undone, but they can be acted upon. And there's also this nice example. It's a story of Herbie Hancock, a famous jazz pianist. And during a solo of Miles Davis, he played a wrong chord on his piano. and it sounded terrible. And he was like, fuck, what have I done? And Miles paused this solo for a second, and then he played some notes that made the chord right. So he turned something that was wrong into something that was right. And Herbie calls this turning poison into medicine. So we think that's a beautiful example of how a mistake can lead to something nice and unexpected. So hopefully, I have a bit of an idea where the method comes from. So now we will go more into depth and the projects which the method has played an important role. The first one is instant compositions. Actually, this project was still part of the research into the method, but in a much later phase, and we had become more familiar with it in the meantime. Overall, for these sessions, we agreed to skip any color, so only work in black and white. And we also added a timestamp in the left corner, because sometimes during the making of a composition, something can happen that's not in the end result, that's not visible in the end result anymore. So that's why we record everything. In our intro, there was this tripod upside down on the ceiling. We use it to film everything from above, so we can watch everything back. So we can say at 2:30 this happened. It's not visible anymore, but it's a nice thing to use for something else or interesting moments. So only black and white, or actually black materials on white paper. And at first they were these really hard lines, but eventually we use crayons as well to these more softer, blurry lines. And every new jam session was based upon the previous one. So the framework was based on the previous one. And I'm going to skip a bit. Is that possible? No. Yeah, it was also nice to see that in the beginning it started with this really quite graphical and geometric shapes, and eventually we came to these more organic shapes. So that transition was really nice to see. And eventually we bundled this in a newspaper that we sent to potential clients or people who would be interested in this method. There were some stills from the video recordings. Here's the overview. On the bottom, you can see the guiding principles again. We framed a few just for fun. And the centerfold was this overview of all the sessions we did. For a couple of days, we started every morning with doing 5 jam sessions, and one column is one day. So you can see a clear visual line in each column, because every jam was based upon the previous one. And the starting point for every new day was based on the previous day. To explain that a bit more, you can clearly see that the third column is based on the fourth composition out of the second one. By doing so, we were able to create a database of images in a fairly short amount of time, which we then used as an input for the rest of our design process, which you can see here as one step. We continue to sketch and make variations based on each column. So on the left, you can see column number 5. And these compositions reminded us of crumpled paper, so we started stamping with crumpled paper. Especially the bottom one reminded us of that. But it also reminded us of smoke, and instead of the blurry lines out of the compositions, we started to make them in Illustrator in really hard lines. And by doing so, and by keep making, we eventually came to a kind of final design, which is shown on the right. This one's titled Fume. And here you can see 3 results of 3 different columns or days. And the last 2 results we presented in this bigger scale just because we wanted to, and looks nice in the publication. Next project is Do You Copy? This took place during the first lockdown, and that forced us in doing jams in a totally different way, because we were using Zoom a lot during that time to discuss projects and talk to each other. And we found out there was this whiteboard function in Zoom in which we could draw simultaneously. So we then started doing these remote sessions in this whiteboard. And in the same time, all over the Netherlands, these transmission towers were set on fire because they were spreading the COVID virus, you know. Like the aesthetics of these towers really appealed to us. And we also had the feeling that we were using these towers because we were sending information to each other from a distance and communicating with each other from a distance. So this formed the framework to do these jam sessions in the whiteboard of Zoom. So I think here we're making a huge transmission tower, and we also like the digital ugly aesthetic of this whiteboard as well. It has a kind of a Microsoft Paint vibe, which is a different thing than Illustrator, but really nice to work with for a change. We still had quite some options, like we could change the size or the shape, and we could also even change the opacity. So we had quite some options. Yeah, you can see the opacity right here. And I was working in the blue color and Jurgen in the red one. And this is a screen recording from Jurgen's screen, so you can see his cursor moving on the screen, and his drawings are really sketched, and mine just pop up out of nothing as soon as I release my mouse button, the image arrives on Jurgen's screen, and vice versa on my screen. So a totally different way of doing these jam sessions. Here a bit more graphic or geometrical way of making these towers. The last one, can't skip this here, but I think it's coming. In the end, we also did some smaller sessions, which were more about sending and receiving from one point to another. Yeah.
Do you play music while working?
No. Most of the times we work in total silence. But that's how we do it. Here you can see the transmission, sending, receiving thing, by the way. But we also give this in workshop form or in education. And sometimes people like to put music on and work on that, or people like to talk a lot. But we are played into each other in such a way that we don't say a word. And in this, here it was impossible because we were not in the same room. Oh yeah, you can still talk via Zoom, of course. So this resulted in a RISO publication containing all these transmission towers. It was titled "Do You Copy?" It's a term used of an expression often used in radio communication to check if someone has received the message correctly. And this idea of radio communication we developed into our own transmission code or design system. As you can see, it contains information about the shape, the size, position, the color, and if an extra action is required. And we use these to take the tower that was made, transform it into a code. The code was sent to the other one, and the other one reconstructed the image based on this code. Maybe it's a bit vague, but here you can see two towers that were made. Jurgen worked in pink and gray, so he made the left one. I worked in blue and yellow. So on the right, you can see my reconstruction of the tower by Jurgen. And on the next spread, you can see them printed on top of each other. And because of the RISO technique, this really has this nice blend of colors, which we really liked. And on the left, you can see the code which was used to decode and code the image. And there was deliberately a lot of room for noise. So as you can see, the first one is a rectangle of 5 by 6 in the bottom left, using color number 2, which had to be copied to the bottom right, but where exactly isn't clear. So also in the previous image, you can see in the top, you can see these two semicircles, but they're placed differently, and also the gradient is applied in a different way. This idea of sending and receiving through a code and the noise that comes with it resulted in these different towers. And sometimes it worked out quite well, or really good as well. So printing those on top of each other wasn't that exciting. And we also like that in a way the aesthetic from Zoom also got a place in this publication because we worked on a grid. It has this pixelated vibe, and we were also restricted to some colors in which this aesthetic comes back in the publication. And we have some with us as well, so if you want to have a look at it in real life afterwards, just come see us. Next up is mono sessions, work we made for an exhibition in Schiedam, end of last year. But first, a sneak peek from a different project that we would like to show because here quite an important development in the method took place. We also get a question a lot if we work together with musicians during these jam sessions. And after this project, we could answer that question with a yes. Because here we recorded these sessions and they were sent to a pianist who responded to them in a musical way. And those recordings were sent back to us, in which we responded again in a visual way, etc., etc. So far, very briefly about that collaboration. But what finally fell into place here was that from the start, when we began with this method, we struggled with the fact that a music note which is played eventually disappears, and a line which is made with a marker stays on the paper forever. Or unless you burn it or whatever, but it doesn't disappear out of itself. But this disappearing aspect of the musical note which is played, we wanted to give that a place in the compositions or jam sessions also. So here we took a glass plate and put ink on it, similar to the monotype printing technique. And we started to erase the ink with different kind of tools, but because the ink, it stays wet, so we also can smear it back. So it has this more fluid property instead of just a marker which is there forever and can be adjusted. And this came also with a new aesthetic that we really liked. So then to the exhibition, because shortly after this project we were asked to contribute to this exhibition titled Glashart in Schiedam. I know one of you saw it, but maybe some others as well. This coincidentally took place in a glass factory. And since we just started working on glass, we really wanted to use this and make work on glass. And the exhibition space was really huge, so we also wanted to make a work of size. So before we knew it, we ordered these 3 glass panes of 2 by 2 meters, weighing 60 kilos each. So we also had to get some special equipment to lift them and move them. We had to construct these wooden constructions to present them. And here you can see one of these sessions, which we recorded at in an empty hall at the factory itself, because our studio wasn't big enough to record it in our studio. And what we really like as well is that over time, we remove more and more ink, and we start to reveal ourselves as well. So it also has this kind of performative aspect. So here's an overview of the 3 compositions we made, and you can clearly see that because of the different tools that we used and the different rules that were applied, that this resulted in a totally different outcome every time. And the smaller works I showed earlier were kind of a preliminary study for this, except that the tools we used for those smaller ones were way too small to use on this scale. So in the smaller ones, we used a roll of tape to remove ink, and that had to be scaled up to a lid from a paint bucket, like this big. And we used these small spatulas, and we had to buy a larger one, which is used to plaster walls. So we had to adjust a lot of things, and it was a lot of struggle. But nevertheless, in the end, it was all worth it, because this was the first time the results from these jam sessions functioned as the end product. While the jams in the projects I showed earlier took place at the beginning of a design process and were not necessarily visible in the end result, here the compositions were shown in the exhibition room, and the video with the recording was projected on the wall onto the right. You can see the beamer standing next to it. So here the composition itself played the key role, which was a first for us, and we really like this. Let's see. Yeah. see. Yeah, and also in this period, everything went quite fast because immediately after this exhibition, our first solo exhibition was around the corner. And we wanted the compositions to play a major role in this exhibition again, but we didn't want to repeat the hassle with the glass paints again. And we also wanted to make some work which was suitable to hang on a wall, so 60 kilos was also a bad idea. So we decided to make 12 diptychs, and we ordered 24 frames. And we decided to make the work directly on the inside of the glass of the frames. A grid was used underneath this glass and played a crucial role in these compositions. You can't see it very clearly in the video, but it's there, believe me. And we made 6 black diptychs which were oriented horizontally, and 6 white ones which are oriented vertically, as you can see here. And we started each one with a first jam, which was repeated for the other side of the diptych, but in a mirrored way. So the second one wasn't really improvising, but more performing or repeating. But this combination was really nice to see in the video, and by combining the 2 recordings in one video, this resulted in a different way of documentation as well, instead of the single videos we made earlier. So this video was also shown in the exhibition itself. We also made these basic wall paintings to present the frames in. It's also about the direction in which the compositions are made. So these are vertically, these horizontal. And in retrospect, we really like the aesthetics of this because it goes really well with the architecture of the building as well. So that was a nice extra, nice bonus. Yeah, this is the last project. We finished this one recently during Open Monumentendag. You can visit various monuments throughout the Netherlands on this day, and we were asked to make a work in honor of an old metal foundry. The process of metal casting and the use of molds in this foundry used as a framework for these sessions, and plus the aesthetics of the technical parts which were made in the foundry inspired us as well for some reason. And in these sessions we tried to make like these technical constructions where we simultaneously made a negative mold shape on the right and this positive casting shape on the left, so kind of a yin-yang thing, if that makes sense. And again, this was a new way of working together, in which we both had our own playing field, instead of just one field in which we work together. But we had to keep a close eye on the other as well, because everything that Jurgen removed, I couldn't remove, and vice versa. So this was a nice way of doing this. Yeah, with this we talked a lot because communication was necessary. Eventually we took these sessions to translate them and see them as a side view of a spatial form. So here the gems were once again acting in a serving role at the start of a design process. And this eventually resulted in a technical looking spatial object which had various mounting options. On the left you can see this object still in one half of the casting mold. And by reproducing this object and connecting them differently via the different mounting options, we created these 3 unique sculptures based from the same looking object. So yeah, the spoiler of Iskander is shown here. So to wrap things up, As you can see, the method has been in development from the start. We tried a lot of different techniques along the way, but the core of the method remains the same. We like to make in an intuitive way and in collaboration with each other. And in this way, we're both the owner of the compositions that arise. And every time it's a surprise where the framework will lead us. And in this way, we can make work which is not conceived but created, which is something we deeply value. Next step will be an artist in residence in November. This will take place in a graphic workshop in Belgium. And we're going to experiment with the monotype printing technique again. We're also, there's a laser cutter there as well, so we're gonna develop our own tools to remove the ink. So we're very looking forward to that and are very curious what kind of new steps this will bring us for our method. And for now, I would like to thank you for listening and your attention. Thank you.